Hello and welcome to another episode of WJ Live, powered by the Western Journal. I'm George Upper, editor-in-chief of the Western Journal, reminding you as always to click that subscribe button and the bell next to it if you're watching us on YouTube, so that you will always receive that notification telling you that a new episode of WJ Live has been posted. So you'll never miss another one, even though YouTube wishes you will miss all of them. For now, they're letting us let you know when they come out. So enjoy it while you can. On the show today, an important argument being made before the Supreme Court of the United States that could literally be life or death for millions. And supervising reporter Michael Austin has the story of some escapees from a COVID quarantine camp.
Careful there.
Yeah. But first, staff reporter Grant Atkinson. I actually just wrote staff reporter here with no name, so I get it's a good thing I know your name.
Yeah, that is good. Thinking on the fly there.
Yeah, the way I just seamlessly filled that in without bringing attention to it. It's just that's the mark of true professionalism. Staff reporter Grant Atkinson brings us a rather disturbing story about school districts in Texas sending armed law enforcement officers to the homes of parents who speak out at school board meetings. Grant, what's the latest on that story?
Yeah, so this is a really interesting one from Round Rock, Texas. There was a couple of incidents. They happened actually a few months ago, each of them. The first one happened in August at a school board meeting, and there was a man, his name was Jeremy Story, and he attempted to present evidence that the superintendent of the school board had assaulted a mistress. He said he had a mistress, he assaulted her, he has his evidence, and I don't know how accurate or not accurate that may have been. What I do know is that the superintendent decided to not let him present this evidence.
Shocking decision. Shocking decision on his part.
As he started to present this evidence that he said would prove the superintendent had assaulted a mistress, the superintendent had a police officer escort this man from the building. It's interesting because I want to go into this a little bit too. In Texas, there are police forces that work in conjunction with the school district. So the Round Rock Independent School District actually has its own police department. It's not super big. There's a few officers. There is actually a canine unit that is part of it. And so they have, some resources, but it's not as big as, a full police department. But it appears there was a police officer from this unit that escorted this person away. Then in September, partly I would assume due to this incident and partly due to the fact that they are going to be discussing a mask mandate in the school district, which is clearly a controversial subject that we've heard a lot about from parents, from anyone really who's been affected over the last couple of years by these mask mandates, but especially at school board meetings, it's been a hotly debated topic. And so they decided that they were just going to not let a majority of parents in the room. It doesn't really specify. This article is from the City Journal. They didn't really specify whether any parents were let in the room, but it said a majority of parents were not allowed to be in the room during this meeting. They locked them out. And there was a second man. His name is Dustin Clark. And he was arguing that they should open the doors, that this is a public meeting. They should be allowed to hear it.
Right.
That's their right to go to if they want. And he was specifically arguing that they're talking about this mask mandate. They were also talking about the potential for a tax that they were going to be raising to fund the school, basically fund the school district. And he said, so if you're going to be talking about taxes, masks, these things are affecting us. We should be allowed to be here and voice our opinion, or at least listen to what you have to say. And they didn't like that he was asking to be let in. The City Journal said that he was calmly demonstrating. He wasn't trying to break in or anything like that. But they didn't like that he was arguing with them. So once again, they asked the police officer to take him away, this time off of the school premises entirely, and remove him so that they didn't have to deal with him anymore. And this article from the City Journal, there's just a sentence I wanted to read because it's pretty shocking. It says, quote, "As he was dragged out by two officers, Clark shouted to the audience, 'It's an open meeting. Shame on you. Communist, communist. Let the public in.'" So he's being dragged away. He's shouting. I mean, I guess you can imagine this scene. It's pretty surreal to be thinking something like that is happening. But you would think, maybe that's the end of it. Okay, they didn't want them at the school board meeting. All right, that's fine. That wasn't the end of it. A few days later, they sent police officers who were from their police force, and they were working in conjunction with the local sheriff's office. They also got permission from them. So it wasn't just the school district police force. It was also the local sheriff department. They're working in conjunction. And they actually arrested both of these men for what they called disorderly conduct that was aimed at disrupting a meeting. Apparently, that's an actual crime that they arrested them for.
If you disrupt a meeting that people aren't even allowed into.
Yes.
That's disorderly conduct. Okay, I got that.
So they arrested them. They actually spent a night in jail, and then they were let out. They're now facing still these charges. They have a fundraiser set up for their legal fees. And so my first question to you guys is just what kind of precedent are we setting if we're going to say that anyone who voices concern in a school board meeting is a threat to the point where they need to have armed officers sent to their house? Is this something we really want to be a path that we want to be going down?
Well, we're already a ways down this path. It began with the National School Boards Association. They put out that letter saying, hey, it's all domestic terrorism. Whenever parents are committing domestic terrorism, when they come and
speaking aloud,
but when they come and threaten the school boards, of course, nobody ever defined what threaten means. And seems like it just means parents being really angry and really loud, which is not illegal in any way.
It's called free speech.
Exactly. So that began, and the National School Boards Association apologized for doing that letter, but nevertheless, Merrick Garland sent out FBI task forces to investigate parents and put them on these red flag lists to determine if they were actual terrorist threats. And then from there, also in kind of all those northern Virginia counties where we saw those controversies over the last few months, Loudoun, Fairfax, Prince William, all those counties had this similar situation where school boards were not letting parents into the meetings. Parents would protest outside, and then the whole meeting would get shut down, and they'd say, oh, well, it was, civil disobedience and disorderly conduct and all this stuff. So this has been building up for a few months now. And now for them to kind of mobilize law enforcement against anyone after the fact, they're not even pulling them out to begin with. They're targeting these parents after it's already said and done. That is pretty shocking. And what is the precedent? Well, the precedent is you can't speak out against your school.
Yeah.
Even if it's a public school, even if they're supposed to be working for you, you have no say in what they're teaching your children.
Yeah, it's disturbing when I kind of actually like the cooperation between law enforcement and school officials, school board officials, at least in theory. They're locally elected. They're people that parents should be familiar with. And that I like the idea of, for instance, in Phoenix, that's not the case. Like, there's 15 levels of bureaucracy between me and the cop on the street, and I don't like that. I respect the cop on the street, but if he's doing something or he or she's doing something I don't like, it's going to take me 15 years to get to talk to the right people, as opposed to this much more localized, setup. So I kind of like that, at least in theory, on paper. I kind of like that. But it leads to the importance of holding these elected officials accountable. I mean, the people of the city, of the school, the parents of the school district should be up in arms that one of their own has been silenced that way. And perhaps they are. I don't know. I don't have any idea. But it's really concerning if they're not, because then what you wind up with is just sort of this tyranny of the majority. If 50% of the population plus one doesn't like what that guy said, they can just send cops to shut him up. And that, hello, Nazi Germany. I mean, I don't want to be, overly dramatic, but you're only like a step and a half away from Nazi Germany at that point.
Yeah. I don't know if there was, or if there is still like huge backlash. I do know the night of their arrest, when they spent night in jail, there were a few parents who went and sort of had a candlelight vigil. They stayed out there sort of in support of the two men who were in jail, and they stayed out there all night. So at least some people are raising an issue with what's happening.
And in Texas, of all places. I mean, come on.
And this is, seems like a good sign based on everything we saw in Virginia. If stuff like this continues to pop up in Texas, our stronghold there will continue to get redder and redder. So that's all good news.
Yeah, I think so, for sure. I think the only other question, George kind of touched on it a little bit. this idea of having a localized police force that works with the school district, I don't think personally that I have a problem with it on the face. I think that it's okay to have, a police force that works with the school. I know we have a coworker here who was a teacher in Texas, and she was in support of these police forces, said that they helped, protect the campus. They helped if there's minor, things going on campus that need to be addressed. They can do that, and they're right there. But obviously, it's a dangerous line when it could go right to them being sent out to threaten parents who speak at school board meetings. So I think it's just a dangerous line to cross, and you have to be very careful there.
Well, the issue there is really holding the elected officials accountable for how they're using this force. And theoretically, at that very local level, again, theoretically, that very local level, voters and parents have an easier job of doing that, as opposed to me trying to get the mayor of Phoenix, voted out of office or recalled or whatever, because I don't like the police policies of the Phoenix PD. That would be a nearly impossible task. I would think trying to do that for some school board officials would be easier.
And I think when we talk about like the more local politics, and we're talking about, okay, so they were elected, so they represent the people. That's usually, in a lot of cases with a lot of these counties, a lot of these locally elected officials, it's not because they won over the people that they won. People aren't at the local level tend to, in a lot of places, not be very engaged in their elections,
right,
especially for, school boards.
Yeah.
And so what you have happen is a bunch of special interest groups come in, a bunch of people supporting CRT and stuff, and they do all these fundraisers, and they rally support among, a subset of that population.
Right.
And then you get these crazies elected that don't represent anybody. And then those people all of a sudden have this law enforcement that they can just use to do their bidding, to go after their detractors.
Yeah.
So I think the problem is less the system and more the fact that people just aren't engaged in their local elections.
Yeah, that's a great point.
So, and, which has been true for a long time.
Yeah.
And it's ironic because your local officials have much more control, much more influence in your actual life than Joe Biden does. We all get worked up about Joe Biden, and with good cause. But those people, your mayor, your city councilman or selectmen, your county officials, your dog catcher, your sheriff, whoever's on the ballot, those people who live in your neighborhood, they are, first of all, much more accountable to you. You represent, maybe 0.5% of their vote in some cases, right? Where you represent, 1/8 of a millionth of Joe Biden's vote. So good luck getting his attention unless you got a few $1 billion. So they're more easily accountable, but also they're right there. They live there, right? They're making decisions every day that literally could affect you. Whereas Biden, can't manage to get most of his agenda passed through Congress, and praise the Lord. So speaking of the leftist agenda, the Supreme Court appears ready this session to perhaps uphold a Mississippi abortion law that bans the murder of unborn children after only 15 weeks of gestation. It questions whether the law is unconstitutional as defined by the Roe v. Wade decision in 1973, which many of us would consider unconstitutional in the first place. Some on the court have argued that to overturn established precedent like Roe v. Wade would jeopardize the appearance of impartiality on the court, making it appear to be just another partisan political institution. But as the Western Journal's Randy DeSoto pointed out in an article just this afternoon, Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh listed 8 precedents during the arguments that previous Supreme Court decisions had in fact overturned, including some of the more famous ones, Brown v. Board of Education, 1954, which overruled a previous separate but equal ruling from Plessy versus Ferguson in 1896, which allowed segregated facilities based on race. I don't think there have been too many people arguing that overturned precedent was a bad idea. Miranda v. Arizona, 1966, required police to give warnings, the famous Miranda warnings about the right to remain silent. Gideon v. Wainwright, 1963, guaranteed the right to counsel. And then one that we might disagree with, but it still serves as a good example here, Lawrence v. Texas in 2003, overruled a case that was at that point not even 20 years old, in which justices had found the Constitution was silent on the matter of same-sex relationships. Lawrence v. Texas essentially granted the right for same-sex couples to marry. Again, overturning precedent. So there's plenty of precedent, it turns out, for overturning precedent. As Kavanaugh pointed out, and he said that's a list of 8, and he said he could go on. There are more examples of that. Now, I think it's important to note that even if the court overturns R. v. Wade completely, which is not a given by any stretch of the imagination, but it is a possibility here. But even if they do that, it would not make abortion illegal. It would simply return that matter to the states where it belongs. There's no reason why this is a federal issue. Return it to the states to decide. So, you guys tell me what you think. If the Supreme Court was to overturn Roe v. Wade or a similar precedent, do you think that makes the Supreme Court into a political partisan branch of the federal government? Would it, in other words, affect the court's credibility as an unbiased institution?
Well, would it affect the credibility? I mean, half of the country would assume that it's a biased political organization now. But I mean, that's not the case. It would be if they did reverse Roe, that's just them going back to neutral, like Kavanaugh's been saying,
right?
This whole time. There's nothing. The Constitution is neither pro-life nor pro-choice. He pointed out during the proceedings, and that would just return it to the states, where probably a good amount of states would make it illegal, a good amount wouldn't, and they would eventually. I think what will happen though is the left will double down on court packing. They will try to destroy everything in their path if they don't get what they want here. But I mean, they've lost credibility with half the country because half the country doesn't think anyone is credible. So that half being the left. So
it's really ironic to me, I would say, that Justice Kagan is bringing up the Constitution and she's talking about how important it is because the way that she rules is not constitutional at all. She thinks that judges should be activists and that they should put in laws that mandate things for the entire country. And that's not what the Constitution lays out at all. The Constitution is very clear that powers should go to the states, those which are not directly given to the federal government. And I think that is what would be happening here if Roe v. Wade was overturned. I was researching this topic so that I'd be prepared to talk about it. And I was reading an article in Esquire, and they were talking about Brett Kavanaugh and this argument that it would send it back to the states. They're like, he's actually just deflecting because right now there are 23 states that have Republican governor and Senate and House. So those states would ban abortion. It's like, yes, that's how it works.
How it's supposed to work.
So they act like that's a bad thing. That's how the Constitution lays things out. So I just think it's really rich, honestly, that Justice Kagan is trying to lecture us about the Constitution when her ruling would be that she wants to make laws, basically set precedent that the entire country has to follow, which is not constitutional in any way.
Michael, you mentioned court packing, which I really find interesting. The idea that, in response to the idea that the Supreme Court has become politicized, what we want to do is make sure that we politicize it. That's the response. Get as many leftists on it as possible. There are some pundits on the right, including I've read from Dick Morris, who's a friend of the Western Journal, regularly publishes on our site. He thinks this is a bad time for this fight. He feels like this is giving ammunition, whatever the result of the whatever the actual decision is, just the fact the argument's being made, and if Roe v. Wade is overturned or even limited, he feels like that's giving the Democratic Party ammunition for the 2022 midterms and possibly even 2024 presidential election. What do you think about that argument?
I mean, it could fire up their base a bit, but I don't think the momentum that we're seeing right now is based around other issues. It's not based around abortion, issues. It's based around education and other cultural things going on. I don't think that
economics.
So I don't think the abortion argument stunts any of that. I think there's actually a lot of people that aren't super passionate about abortion and they're kind of tired of the debates. And I don't think they're going to be swayed either way. You'll have your super pro-abortion coalition that's already going to always vote left.
Right.
They'll get fired up, but we don't care if we lose those people. So
right. Grant, what do you think?
Yeah, I kind of think on the same lines as Michael a little bit. I would say that the people who are so pro-abortion are never going to vote conservative. They're just not. Like, these are the bluest of the blue, leftist of the left people, and they're going to be over there voting for progressives for the rest of time. You're not going to win those people over. The question, I guess, would be, are there these people in the middle who are lukewarm on abortion, where if you overturn Roe v. Wade, that these people are going to say, well, the conservative party, the Republican Party, is terrible. I don't want to vote for them because they did this. I just don't see that happening, particularly because now it also comes into play if the media lies about this, which I think is very possible.
No.
You think is very possible.
Yes. Yeah. But if they tell the truth, it's what we said, which is that the power goes back to the states. And I think that most rational people would understand that that's how it should work. That's how it should be.
And I think when we're trying to win over those people in the middle, the side that is running on pro-family and pro-family being involved in education and lower taxes is going to beat the side that's running on pro-choice or pro-abortion.
That makes sense.
So,
all right, Michael, before I toss it over to you, I have an important question, which is, do you have any evidence of my having beaten anybody? Because I'm not giving you the mic if I think we're going to have to go, if I'm going to have to get Rachel to come in here and pull you out of the studio.
Call your local police force.
That's Rachel. Yeah, right. That's what I said, Rachel.
Yeah. No, I mean, I don't.
You don't have any evidence.
I'm not going to put. Yeah, I don't have any evidence. Let's just say that.
All right.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Diplomatist. All right. So, So, Michael, what you do have evidence of is some just crazy behavior on the part of our friends in Australia.
Our friends in Australia. Yeah. So,
and by friends in Australia, I think I mean Paul Hogan. I think he's the only one I can think.
Of course.
Crocodile Dundee.
Now
I think
that's a knife.
He's the only friend I can think of there.
So the lockdowns, the COVID rules in Australia have been just absolutely like the craziest, the most insane you could possibly imagine in the free world, if you want to call it that. So people,
I don't know if they qualify anymore, do they?
You know, it's so the rules are different in different areas of the country, but you know, in Sydney, basically people get hefty fines for just walking around without permission. For a long period of time, people were only allowed to go outside for 1 hour of exercise a day. You have to have your mask on, even if you're like alone, secluded in a park, walking your dogs. And in more recent months, they started opening up these kind of COVID camps where they would isolate and quarantine people with COVID. Concentrate? No, it's not concentrating.
No.
They're concentrating people with COVID symptoms in one place. But yeah, let's not go crazy.
And surprise, surprise, places like CNN, MSNBC, all the liberal outlets in America haven't really covered the extent to which those laws have gone. But
I'm sure they're in favor of them.
So to a lot of people on both the left and the right, this story that came out yesterday, I believe, was just absolutely insane, which was 3 men escaped the COVID quarantine compound, and there was this huge police manhunt around the compound to chase down these guys and lock them back up in the quarantine camp. And it's just watching the story, and there's you can look up videos of just like they're stopping cars on the road, they're searching every car, there's police like searching through the woods and stuff just looking for these guys, and they found
because
them.
They're sick.
And just those images them on their own of just, okay, you have this flu-like disease. Okay, we're going to throw you in a camp and you're going to be there indefinitely.
If you get out, we're going to call a manhunt and put up a perimeter.
Oh, and by the way, and so they caught these guys. It turns out they were all teenagers, age 15, 16, and 17.
So not at risk from COVID.
And actually, it doesn't specify. I don't think it specifies whether they're male or female, but they're 3 teens.
Okay.
And they caught them, and upon being apprehended, they tested them for the virus, and they all tested negative.
Oh, good.
Oh, perfect.
So, which is strange since they're putting them back in the camp
To make sure they get it.
Yeah. That doesn't make much sense.
Yeah.
But one aspect, so let's just pause there. There's more craziness, but let's just pause there and just give me your guys' thoughts on like, how crazy is this that would you have expected Australia to have COVID rules like this before the pandemic started?
The precedent that jumps to mind is there. Well, there are two.
Yeah.
There's their gun confiscation.
You're right.
Which essentially has left the Australian populace incapable of defending against this kind of government overreach. They don't have any choice but to comply at this point, right? I guess they could throw boomerangs or whatever they do.
I've heard those
Australia.
are dangerous.
The kangaroos that start going at them.
Trained kangaroos.
But what I really, kangaroo boxers. Yeah. What I really want to, I mean, it's almost like these folks have, and this is not fair, and it's a terrible stereotype, but I'm going to say it anyway. It's almost like the Australian population has so much former convict DNA in the populace that it's like this is what they expect to be incarcerated.
Yeah.
It's like that's what they want, which is ridiculous. But that I really just want to kind of shake them and go.
Yeah.
You realize this is how the whole world is looking at you now, right?
Yeah.
Like you want to be imprisoned by your government.
Yes.
Is that really what you want?
Well, and that's a big part of it too, George, before we move on to what you think, Grant, is that, the majority of Australians do tend to support these policies, like over 50%. A lot of these policies, at least,
They're going to get what they asked for then.
and they are. And there's this lack of fear of the government, which seems to be really not working in their favor.
Working out well
at
for
the
them.
moment. But it also, they're a democratic republic like us, democratically representative republic. But they don't have quite the amount of checks and balances. We have an insane amount of checks and balances.
We do.
People have done their best in both the Republican Party and the Democratic Party to wear away at those,
Right.
and they have significantly, and yet we still have the most checks and balances of any government, which protects us from government overreach. And places like Australia don't have that.
Yeah.
And so you see with this what can happen when there aren't as many of those. Yeah, what do you think of all that stuff that's been going on, Grant?
I think that idea of what can happen is what's so concerning to me, and it is the checks and balances thing, but to me, it's more what you were talking about before that, which is the people over 50% are in favor of it. People aren't saying this is ridiculous. I can't believe this is happening. And you have media outlets here in America. This is a giant story. I mean, they are imprisoning people because they have COVID, and we're not hearing about it. People aren't telling us about it. To me, the scary part is that could happen to us. I would like to think that if we have somebody who is going to act like that, like the Australian president, and is going to try to impose these ridiculous restrictions, that we would fight back at this point. But how long does that last? At what point does our population become similar to the Australian population? I don't think that it's close, right? I don't think it's 50% or even that close to 50% of people who would agree with those kind of things now. But I think there maybe are 25% who would do whatever the government tells them at this point. And so it's important to realize that we need to make sure that a larger percentage of our population doesn't start to think that way, because that's what will happen.
And, all those checks and balances, the way our government, our political system works, it protects the minority. So, in Australia, if you have, let's say, a plurality or a majority of people agreeing on one thing, rest of the country is going to have to do that in pretty short order. Here, you could have 52% of the population agree on one topic. Well, they're not going to be able to force the entire country, the entire 48%, millions and millions of people, to go along with what they think is the right thing to do. So that's just, it's about protecting the minority. And all these people can say, oh, we got to get rid of the electoral college to protect, the rights of African Americans
or
and all
the
that.
filibuster, or any of those kinds of arguments.
You're protecting the majority whenever you break away at any of those things. Don't kid yourself into thinking you're protecting the minority.
Well, it's like when you would in middle school or elementary school, and you would just vote 3-2, your group of 5 friends, and then you have to do the thing the other people said, and then I feel like at that point, we're taught about what a democratic republic is, but we don't really understand.
Yes.
We think democracy is just, when you're a kid,
one man, one
you
vote.
think it's
That's
just,
what you think democracy
but
is.
it's so much more than that. And if you go to pure democracy, this is the kind of thing that can happen.
Well, and you also think that, okay, so 6 of the 10 people voted one way. That's the way we should all live our lives. And no, that's not how it works. Somebody in California doesn't know what it's like to live in Iowa. So having them make all the decisions for everybody doesn't make any sense. And then before we wrap up, just the one other small part of the story that I thought was really interesting. These 3 teens that, the police caught in Australia and threw back into this camp, they're all from this Binjari community in Australia, this small community of about 200 people, and it's an Aboriginal community. It's an indigenous population. So essentially, the government and I've further in a few minutes I was doing some research.
That's
and
a really good look for the Australian government.
The Aboriginal population in Australia has been very hesitant to get the vaccine. And so essentially what you have here is the Australian government, rounding up a bunch of minorities, a bunch of indigenous people, and throwing them into camps, locking them up, throwing away the key, I guess, because even if they test negative, they're still going to throw them back in. So, I mean, it's incredible that that's where we're at now. And I can't believe that the left is not just screaming about how, they're locking up indigenous populations in Australia.
Which, the left is not about individual freedom. The left is about power. It's what they've always been about. They're not about human rights. They'll claim to be. They're on the side of human rights when that being on that side gives them an excuse to grab more power. That's how they always work. It's how they always have worked. White men in Australia have a horrific record of dealing with the Aboriginal population there. This is just such a bad look for the government of Australia. My goodness, I'm dumbfounded. I don't even have. It's one of those situations where, I shouldn't have to tell you how bad you look. This is so. Do you not own a mirror? This is so obviously bad. But look, if they're this dumb, if they're this tone deaf, me telling them that wouldn't help anyway.
Yeah.
So
I think it's even. I know we have to wrap up here. It's almost on a more extreme scale, the same thing that we saw in America with minority hesitancy to get the vaccine. Like African American people.
Well, the vaccine passports in New York are basically all right, black people, you're not allowed to buy
making
food.
Black people not be allowed to go to the grocery store. And this is just a larger version of that same idea.
That's a great look.
Yeah.
Friends, I don't know about, what it is in Australia now? It's June. Okay, maybe it doesn't work that way, but it is summer in Australia.
It's warm.
It's warm. And what it is here is December. I cannot believe we are already in December.
Yeah.
And I don't know about you. I think that's because 2020 felt more like it was 12 years long as opposed to 12 months long.
Yeah.
And so 2021 has just flown by. But here we are. The Christmas season is officially upon us. All your grumpy friends who don't want you listening to Christmas music prior to Thanksgiving have nothing to say anymore.
I feel personally attacked by that.
Yeah.
That was my intention.
Oh, okay.
What was I? Christmas music. Right. Nobody can complain. If you want to listen to Grandma got run over by a reindeer all day long, I mean, I might seek counseling, but nobody can complain if that's what you want to do. That means that you are looking for gifts for the thinking conservatives in your life. And may I humbly suggest, no, I probably can't. I don't do much humbly, but may I suggest that I proudly suggest a membership to the Western Journal for that spouse, that parent, that boss, that friend who has everything and you don't know what to get them. Here's a gift that doesn't cost a lot of money. All you have to do is go to westernjournal.com/join and you can buy it for them. They will enjoy an ad-free reading experience. Actually, technically it's ad light because there's a couple of ads we don't have full control over, but they mostly don't show up. Trust me, it's the next best.
Yeah.
I'd call it ad-free if our lawyers would let me call it ad-free. Let me put it that way because it's that close. But there are a few potential exceptions once in a while. But they're going to experience that fantastic reader interface with the Western Journal. You get to enjoy knowing that you're helping the Western Journal stand up for conservative principles, stand up against censorship from big tech tyrants, and just continue to fight against the lies of the mainstream media and the silence. For instance, in this ridiculous Australia story, somebody has to tell you about that. You need to know about that because we don't want to see that happening here. And you're not going to see it in the establishment media. They literally don't want you to know that happened. That's literally what's going on. We stand against that. And not only do your dollars support us financially and let us do that by making us less dependent on the whims of social media platforms like Facebook and Twitter, who hate us and would love to see us go out of business tomorrow. Your support also just means the world to us. It just supports us emotionally in addition to financially. And we appreciate that very much. So if you're looking for a gift, maybe even a gift for yourself, westernjournal.com/join. There's never been a better or more important time to become a member at the Western Journal. With that, we will bid you farewell until next time. We'll be back to bring you truth every Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific right here. We'll see you again next time on WJ Live, powered by the Western Journal. Until then, stay safe.